Hello everyone, welcome back to another Top 10 Commander video. This time I want to take the entire history of Magic the Gathering's Commander format and give you my picks, my opinion of course, of the top 10 most hated commanders ever. So this will include commanders that maybe current year are not that oppressive, they don't get the same kind of reaction that they used to, but at some point they were considered one of the most hated commanders in the entire format. So that's really what I'm going for here. Number 10 is the Revvy Imperial Tactician. Now when it comes to the most hated thing in the game, it might be stacks. And I do think that to Revvy there are ways that you can play her where it's not necessarily stacks, it's not necessarily oppression. That being said, going back to 2013, and for maybe a couple years or so, Revvy was considered one of the best, if not the best commander in the format. You just had several ways of manipulating taps and untaps, and it really has to do with that ability to flash her into play essentially. All you have to do is pay that 4 mana, you never have to pay the commander tax, which you can already imagine if your commander breaks the rules of the game, people are going to tend to notice they're not going to like it as much. But we have things like Stasis, we have things like Winter Orb that just became very difficult to deal with. And if your opponent has a Revvy, it means that they can untap and manipulate taps so that they're not as affected by whatever they're playing as you are. So pretty much just an oppressive commander if you choose to play her that one way. And then number 9, we have Kalia of the Vast. Another very similar situation, but for a long period of time. I think we all know if you were playing back in 2012, 2013, if you had a Kalia, you could one-shot an opponent with the card Master of Cruelties. Master of Cruelties can only attack alone, however, when you cheat him out there, he's already attacking. And so is your Kalia and however many other attackers you have. So if you were able to get your Master of Cruelties into play, you just needed your Kalia to deal damage in order to kill off an opponent. This was easily the biggest reason why people didn't like Kalia, but even outside of that 1-2 punch, cheating into play creatures was very powerful earlier on in Commander. It still is, but this was one of the only commanders that was able to do it like this. So for that, I think she was hated for a little bit there. Number 8 is a commander I think people still don't like, Centripets. The act of playing with your opponent's cards is always going to be hated. It doesn't really seem to matter what you do. We have the new card Tergrid, and that deck is all about stealing your opponent's cards. We had Gonti, Lord of Luxury. Very similar idea, you're going to be taking cards from your opponents, which is always hated. That being said, Centripets are a little bit lower here because you do have to pay mana for what you're stealing. It may not belong to you, but you still have to pay that mana cost, which means, while all time, Centripets might be one of the most hated commanders in the format, it has certainly aged compared to some better options, I feel. Then number 7, we have Anamar, Soul of Elements. Without a doubt, you create a sense of invulnerability for yourself when your commander has protection from the 2 best removal colors in the game. I mean, that's it. Whatever else you were able to do with Anamar, which was a lot, you were able to pretty much cheat into play creatures because their mana costs were significantly reduced. It just really didn't seem as oppressive as making it so that not only are your opponents going to have a difficult time dealing with Anamar, but your Anamar is just going to get bigger. And that protection also means that you're able to attack a player who has nothing but white and black creatures, and potentially deal commander damage and win the game that way. Earlier on, I would say a lack of variety was probably the biggest knock against Commander back in 2012, 2013. And you can understand why. You have a creature that's difficult to get rid of that makes it easier to play your creatures, and another commander that cheated into play angels, demons, and dragons. Then number 6, we have Narset, Enlightened Master. Narset is very powerful. No doubt about it, power's a big deal here when we're talking about the most hated commanders. However, the way that Narset is powerful is also incredibly linear, meaning that you're going to see the same thing happen just about every game if you're playing against a relatively optimized Narset deck. The goal is to get Narset out there as quickly as possible, and once you do, congratulations, she has hexproof. Same kind of issue as with Anamar, very difficult to deal with her at that point. Once she attacks, good luck. Hopefully you don't lose the game right there. Because then the game is about, do they get to an extra turn or do they get to an extra combat? And there are a ton of sorceries, there are some instants that do that. And when you fill your deck with nothing but both of those, in addition to other ways of making your Narset unblockable, evasive in other ways, you can just keep attacking and you'll deal commander damage to every player at the table. Not really fun though. I think that's the one thing that I would advise against people who are looking to play a new commander deck because it's powerful. Stay away from commanders that are rather linear and are harder to take advantage of in different ways. I think Narset, if you're not doing that, she's a rather tame commander. And then number 5 is Grand Arbiter Augustine. I've talked about how much I don't like Grand Arbiter Augustine because, well, he's just pretty much a stacks commander. There's really no way around it like with Revvy. It is resource denial to a degree where anytime you get closer to resource denial, it's just gonna make people hate you. And while Grand Arbiter Augustine has the kind of reputation to where not many people want to play him anymore, it still doesn't stop him from being one of the most hated commander options in the game, because there are no illusions here. When you see Grand Arbiter, you know that your game is going to be a lot harder. But all time, without a doubt, Grand Arbiter just so difficult to deal with. And then number 4, we have Atraxxa, Praetor's Voice. Probably a good example of a commander that is just so all-around powerful that it becomes difficult to deal with. Not only do you get a solid blocking creature with good keywords, you get a solid attacker as well. The proliferate triggers that you will get are just ridiculous. Getting that at the beginning of your end step means that if you're playing Infect, you can abuse that. If you're playing Super Friends, you can abuse that. If you're playing +1/+1 counters, you can abuse that. -1/-1 counters on your opponent's creatures, you can abuse that. Everyone has played an Atraxxa deck, it seems, because you have so many different directions that you can go in. And I would say the reason why Atraxxa is really hated is because she is so flexible to the point where she can match up well against pretty much any other commander deck. And when you can match up well against any commander deck, you tend to earn a negative reputation. And then number 3, we have Breya, Ethereum Shaper. I think compared to Atraxxa, Breya is significantly less fun, and probably deserves this reputation of being hated in the commander format. Banned in dual commander 1v1 for an obvious reason. If you don't have support at the table, it's very difficult to ever come back against a Breya deck. Breya makes it so easy to combo with just about any artifact combo you can think of. You're playing all 4 colors, so that gives you access to just about all the best artifact support you can think of. Gives you access to black, so guess what? You can play competitive EDH pretty easily. But even if you were to just think about a competitive EDH commander deck, okay, fair enough, I guess we would consider all of them hated, but Breya is just so consistently powerful no matter how you play her, competitive or casual. In Breya, it just seems that there's always some way that you can recover, which in an artifact deck is usually one of the biggest weaknesses, having so much removal that can just destroy your board. But every time you play Breya, you get those 2 Thopter tokens, you get to abuse Thopter tokens with a variety of sack outlets like Krark Clan Ironworks, Ashnod's Altar. Those 2 are really big combo pieces with any Breya deck. And the abilities, I think. The abilities are incredibly powerful, and usually whenever you have a commander that once you get infinite mana, you pretty much just win. You know, game to game, you're just gonna do the same exact thing. And that's the problem I think people run into when playing Breya, is that you just end up at the same result just about every time. You're going to be using that Lightning Bolt 3 damage. And then number 2, we have Alloro, Ageless Ascetic. Maybe not the most powerful on its face, but there's something about sitting back and hiding in your shell that is always one of the most hated things in Commander. And Alloro for a while was the most played Commander option in the game. You can synergize with life gain, and that's, fair enough, a pretty good strategy. But what really makes Alloro such a hated commander in my opinion, it's like when you're playing a video game, if you're playing Call of Duty or Halo. It's that one player who's just hiding out in the same area. They don't really move around the map, they don't really expose themselves. They hide in a very advantageous spot, and they just pick off player after player. People start to get frustrated with just how easy the game is for them compared to other players at the table. So if you are going to be playing Alloro, there are a ton of ways you can build Alloro where you're not the most hated, but it just seems that immediately, when you're gaining 2 life each one of your upkeeps, you put the target over your head. Naturally, when you do this, what's your first instinct? I gotta protect myself. If I'm gaining life every one of my turns, my opponents are going to want to get back at me. So let's throw up something like a Ghostly Prison or a Propaganda. Let's make it harder for my opponents to attack me. This, and also playing control colors, which means you can counter just about everything, you can remove just about everything, means that not only are you going to be dirtling in your little shell, but you're also going to control the game from your shell. So without a doubt, one of the most hated commanders for that reason. So before I go on to number 1, let's talk about some honorable mentions. We have Yarok the Desecrated. I think Yarok is a very efficient commander. Whenever you get double of anything, you get double ETB triggers, you're going to make everybody else at the table jealous, and it's also incredibly easy to win with for that reason. We have the new Tergrid God of Fright, and I think just because 2020 was a year where most people were playing with a webcam, commanders like Tergrid are probably not going to be seeing that much play for a while, but when we do start to play in person more often, Tergrid is going to be one of the more hated commanders without a doubt. There's also Skithiryx the Blight Dragon. I think Infect is hated, it's no secret, but I think it's hated to the point where not many people are interested in playing it. It's kind of like with Grand Arbiter Augustine. However, I think it's a lot harder to deal Infect to each individual player. And then we have number 1. Number 1 is Levald, Emissary of Trest. This list is really for the entire history of the commander format, so yes, Levald is a banned commander, but there was a period of time where Levald was considered the most hated commander of all time. And compared to other commanders here, yes, they're all hated. This is very similar to Grand Arbiter Augustine. The commander is really just built to be broken. You can make an excuse for most of the other creatures on this list, but Levald was really meant to make it so that whenever you play something like a Windfall, each opponent is not going to draw more than one card. You get all of the advantage in playing these cards in addition to the control game that you're also going to have. So you're going to make it way too difficult to ever come back. This is the kind of ability that I really don't think Blue should have the access to, because it makes it so that, okay, you get one card a turn at best. I have a counter spell, and you have nothing to follow it up with. And I have even more card draw. I just draw into more card draw. So Levald, the whole purpose of that deck when it was around, it was just to make it so that you draw into more ways of keeping your opponents from ever drawing more cards. And then you probably take forever to win with something like a Laboratory Maniac. There was a time where I cared about the ban list, what cards should be put on there, what cards should be taken off. If there was one card that I was not sad to see go, it was Levald. But anyway, let me know what you think of these 10 most hated commander cards throughout the history of Commander. My name is Void. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you all next time.